I think I want to play that music again. Let me find. Let me find it. Let me find it. There you go. Woo! Yeah, I get fly than the motherfucker, higher than the motherfuckers. Y'all know how it is, peanut butter with the smuckers. I do me, Mo B. It's no wonder I'm doing this thing since back in the day. OV, that's an old villain. Been doing my thing, never did no dealing. I'm not a dealer, but I go clock in and get my ends, man. I don't got friends, and stay by my solo, my lonely. Always eat steak, no bologna, You can find me on the strength, doing me, Mo B. Yeah, spit the gift, never slip. Always on my two-step, getting my, don't need no weapon, man. My mind is that, never had to pull no strap. All I ever did was pray for those that wanna harm your boy Mo. I get my dough. I don't play with y'all, man. I just get it in every day. Y'all know how my friend Woo. Man, I love this beat. Turn it down a little bit. I got something for y'all, man. Got something for y'all, man. So yeah, as I always say on all my videos, everybody is black. And I know a lot of y'all be mad when y'all hear from me because y'all don't want to believe nothing nobody black, nothing with this melanin say. Y'all think, I don't know, in y'all mind, we liars, we criminals, we sell drugs, we y'all think we the worst people on earth when really we're the best people on earth. And I'm about to show you proof of why you should celebrate every person with melanin from now on. You wouldn't exist without us.
Why did humans evolve in Africa? Why this continent and not Europe, Asia, or the Americas? Think of the Earth like a giant laboratory. Each continent is a workstation running its own experiment. Some are hot and humid, others are cold and dry. Some are violent and hostile, while others are more tranquil and accommodating. Every aspect of every environment is like a different ingredient in the stew of life. And it was the African experiment that created the human lineage. That's puzzled anthropologists for years. But it's an even deeper question to ask why. It's a more complicated question, too. In this video, I'll show you the evidence, the fossils, stone tools, and genetics that all point to Africa. But we'll also dig deeper into our primate evolution and the global shifts that set the stage for humanity's rise. So, to understand where we come from, we must start our journey in the distant past.
Had to throw them eyes. Had to throw them eyes in there. We ain't got
A
no
useful
eyes. Like,
place to begin is
we
with
ain't had
the
no eyes
early
like that.
evolution of primates. When you think of a primate, you probably think of something like a chimp, an orangutan, or maybe a lemur. but there are as many as 500 species belonging to the primate order today, and we are one of them. The diversity among us is astounding, yet there are a few things we all mostly have in common. We have grasping hands, nails instead of claws, forward facing eyes with keen vision, teeth adapted to generalized diets, and relatively big brains. Anthropologists have a rough idea as to when these traits started to converge into an animal we can call a primate. It probably happened during the Paleocene to Eocene transition, sometime between 75 and 55 million years ago. It's a wide window because evolution doesn't hand us neat timestamps.
I know a lot of you religious people don't believe in none of this. Y'all gonna argue with this forever. But I hate to tell y'all, but it's just the truth, man. It's, you know, truth. Believe in truth, man. Like, I don't care how deep your faith is. Lean on some truth too. You know, God created science too. Yeah, so lean on some of that, man.
For those of you familiar with paleontology, you'll know why this was an important period in Earth's history. It marks the end of the non avian dinosaurs. Around this time, they started going extinct, likely due to an asteroid impact, and mammals began to replace them. The primate story stretches so far back that our earliest ancestors may have shared the planet with the last dinosaurs. Meet Purgatorius. Its fossils have been found in Montana, dating as old as 66 million years ago. It was a tiny, tree-dwelling mammal that looked like a shrew until you peer at its ankles. Then you realize it's some sort of proto-primate. Those highly mobile ankles are a clue. They represent the kind of wrist and ankle mobility later primates use for clinging to branches. Running alongside it in the fossil record are the Plesiadapiforms. They were something like a cross between a squirrel and a tiny monkey. Their remains have been found around the globe. Like Purgatorius, they appear to have also been a transitional species between more rodent-like animals and primates. What tips the scale in favor of primates is their tooth pattern, which is similar to modern-day lemurs and lorises. Since these little critters didn't have forward-facing eyes, hands adapted to grasping, or big brains, they weren't full members of the primate club yet. The full-time members came in around 55 million years ago. They are called the euprimates. These were true primates, including the adapids and omomyoids. They start to show the full suite of primate traits, with those forward-facing eyes for depth perception, grasping hands and feet with nails instead of claws, more flexible shoulder and wrist joints, and relatively larger brains than the earlier Purgatorius. So why did these traits evolve in the first place? Experts have proposed a few different hypotheses. Early on, it was believed that they were simply adapting to life in the trees. However, critics argue that there are plenty of other tree-dwelling species that did not evolve into primates. Alternatively, the visual predation hypothesis argues that primates evolved as stealthy insect hunters. Their excellent vision and precise grasping helped snatch up small, fast prey. Another idea is the angiosperm radiation hypothesis. Modern flowering plants, called angiosperms, began to evolve around the same time. Fruit and flowers created new food sources, selecting for color vision and fine motor skills. Picture these early primates learning to spot something ripe and red against the backdrop of green leaves. It wouldn't have been easy before evolving the visual capacity to do so. Each idea comes with evidence. They certainly lived in the trees, their teeth and behavior suggest insect-based diets, and the timing of fruiting plants lines up almost perfectly. Importantly, these explanations aren't mutually exclusive. For example, trees full of fruit also hosted swarms of insects. So these little guys probably had access to both. In all likelihood, it was some combination of all three that created the perfect evolutionary soup. Each pressure would nudge primate anatomy and behavior in similar directions. What matters for our story is this: primates evolved traits that opened ecological doors. These traits set the stage for what would eventually produce us, a smart, adaptable species. Next is a crucial stage in primate evolution, and it actually didn't happen in Africa.
So y'all hear that? So evolution depends on pressures, on certain pressures. I'm willing to bet that all the pressure that black people are getting these days, we're going to be the one to evolve. We're going to be the one to evolve to the next step of evolution. All these pressures we getting, just like the same pressures we've been getting from the beginning of time with nature, with these animals trying to kill us, the fight or flight instincts that was developed. We're going to develop because of all of these pressures that's been uh, man-made pressures that's been created. Yeah, so yeah, man, just that's just a little food for thought. I just wanted that thought just came to me, so I just wanted to share that.
Around 40 million years ago, the first higher primates show up in the fossil record. They're called anthropoids, and they included the ancestors of all monkeys, apes, and humans. This is when the primate experiment started to look more modern. The oldest anthropoid fossil was found in China. The remarkably tiny specimen is called Eosimius, which means a dawn monkey. It's their short heel bone that tells us they moved around the trees in a similar way to modern monkeys. New fossil finds from Myanmar and Pakistan affirm that Asia was probably the starting place for this group of primates. They eventually made it into the African continent, and if we didn't know more about our planet's geologic history, we might assume they simply migrated there, climbing from branch to branch over a vast jungle canopy. But there's a twist. Africa and Asia weren't always connected by land. They were separated by the Tethys Seaway, which linked the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This would have posed a massive barrier for migrating anthropoids. Shortly after 40 million years ago, a slow motion clash of continents reshaped this ancient ocean. Deep beneath our feet, Earth behaves like a slow lava lamp. Heat from the core warms the mantle rock, which rises as buoyant plumes and then cools and sinks. This creates sluggish convection currents. These currents drag the rigid crust we stand on, causing large-scale tectonic shifts. Sometimes a hot mantle plume reaches upward and balloons the crust. It was a combination of these geologic events that connected Africa with Asia. The Afar plume, for example, lifted plateaus in northeast Africa. The African and Arabian tectonic plates drifted north, driven by the heat rising from the Earth's mantle. They slammed into the southern edge of Eurasia. This collision pushed up mountains in places like Turkey and Iran. It also welded Arabia to Africa. More importantly, it created new land. Volcanic material rose from the depths, hardening into islands. By around 20 million years ago, a landmass called the Gomphotherium land bridge formed, closing the Tethys Seaway and connecting the continents for good. This changed ocean circulations and monsoon patterns, which gradually increased aridity in some places while enhancing rainfall elsewhere. A variety of new ecosystems formed in and around the land bridge, from dense forests to grassy savannas. This was the opportunity our anthropoid ancestors needed. They first got to Africa using those early island chains and shallowing seas. Thank God they did, because those that remained in Asia are believed to have gone extinct due to a severe cooling period. Who knows if we'd be here if it wasn't for those island-hopping primates.
Monday CRM has the best AI features in the game,
especially in sales.
hands down.
So for me, email.
Once isolated in Africa, the immigrant anthropoids diversified. This is when we see New World and Old World monkeys splitting into different lineages. Today, tiny traits separate them, including their nostril orientation and tooth counts. But the bigger story is about their geography. The population that would become New World monkeys mysteriously made it to South America. The current hypothesis is that they drifted across the Atlantic Ocean on a giant natural raft made largely of vegetation. This is our most reasonable explanation, but we don't know for sure. Those that remained in Africa would become Old World monkeys and apes. Once that land bridge formed 20 million years ago, it allowed for even larger scale migrations. Tons of Asian rodents, ungulates, and carnivores poured into Africa for the first time. In the other direction, an elephant-like genus known as Gomphotherium entered Asia. The name Gomphotherium land bridge comes from these massive mammals. African primates joined the party too and recolonized Asia using the land bridge. In short, these massive tectonic events opened doors for otherwise isolated animals. What was once a barrier became a gateway for primates to cross-colonize these continents and kickstart a new evolutionary chapter. Asia supplied the seeds and planted them in Africa, but a few things still had to happen before we see humanity sprout from the African soil. By the Miocene epoch, around 23 million years ago, the primate experiment intensifies and inches towards us. Apes burst onto the scene. Unlike monkeys, apes, including humans, lack tails. They also have larger brains, more complex social lives, and bigger bodies in general. One of the earliest candidates was Proconsul. The Proconsul group consists of as many as 15 different species, living mostly in East Africa around 20 million years ago. They had a monkey-like body, ape-like teeth, and a relatively larger brain. Because of this mix, some researchers hesitate to call them a true ape. That said, their main ape trait was their lack of a tail. This half monkey, half ape design makes it a good model for a transitional species. Note how its body plan continues to build on adaptations we saw in Purgatorius and the first primates millions of years earlier. Two important climate events took place as our ape lineage was taking shape. First was a climate optimum around 17 million years ago. Subtropical forests spread across Eurasia and Africa as temperatures significantly increased. Various apes used these forests to expand further into Europe and Asia, and the fossil map fills with odd relatives. We see swamp apes in Spain, forest apes in Hungary, island specialists off Italy, and Asian forms foreshadowing orangutans. But this roaring ape expansion came to an end a few million years later as temperatures began to plummet. A brutal cooling period at the end of the Miocene wiped out most Eurasian apes. The poor Dryopithecus was one of these. Dryopithecus thrived in Europe between roughly 12 and 9 million years ago. Fossils show it was about chimp-sized, with long arms, flexible joints, and curved fingers built for swinging and climbing. Its brain was comparable to a chimp's as well. Its teeth were very ape-like, with sharp canines and cheek teeth adapted to chewing fruit. Close examinations of their tooth enamel suggest they grew slowly, which is an important trait in the ape lineage. Just think about how long it takes a human to mature compared to other animals. This is essential for the growth of our big brains and intelligence. Dryopithecus was officially an ape. Despite its novel adaptations, it could not withstand the drastic climate changes of its time. This cooling period dried up the lush European forests. Their habitats gradually shrunk, and they eventually went extinct. A host of other European apes followed suit. As a result, really only Africa and parts of Southeast Asia remained as refuges. The surviving primates in Africa included lineages that would give rise to chimps, gorillas, and eventually hominins. Those evolving into orangutans and gibbons were the Asian offshoots. After the Miocene boom and Eurasian collapse, the primate story continues to puzzle us. By 7 million years ago, the human lineage began to emerge, but the gaps at this critical point are extra frustrating. We don't have a ton of fossils from this period, so making connections between species is very difficult, hence why we don't necessarily have a quote-unquote missing link. Nonetheless, the fossils we do have tell us one thing: Africa was our Garden of Eden. The dawn of humanity looks more like a garage band than a polished symphony. It's messy, bold, and experimental. Like I said, it started around 7 million years ago when we separated from our common ancestor with chimpanzees. While the chimps still favored the trees and only knuckle walked while on the ground, our lineage began to favor the ground. We became bipedal, meaning we walk on 2 feet. Other apes only do this on occasion, but we're fully committed. This is what really sets us apart from the rest of the primates. It's what makes us special. And the first fossils with signs of this trait come from Africa. This is honestly one of our biggest clues supporting an African origin for humanity. Just a heads up, there are quite a few hominin species that could be discussed here, so for the sake of time, we'll have to pick and choose a few highlights. The earliest example is a species called Sahelanthropus
I want to go into the
chadensis.
comments
It shows
right
up in
now.
Chad.
'Cause right now, with all of this right-wing violent shit going on, I'm guaranteeing you that in the comments, it's a bunch of hate. They don't want to hear this, that we all the same right now. What? Thanks for not using AI every time I discover new science or history. Trying to always brace myself for a robotic voice or a lazy script. I appreciate the effort and can't stand AI slop subbed. As I understand, there's more genetic diversity in any 2 separate regions of Africa than in the entirety of the rest of the human race. That alone should point at Africa as the cradle of humanity. Let's see what the responses to him is. Agreed. Okay, this is what the author said. Agreed. Genetics will probably be our most useful tool going forward. Assuming that to be true, why would you think that supports doctrinal assertion? Yet their development in science, technology, culture, society, etc., didn't evolve much. What you talking about? You proof that we evolved. What is you talking about? There's so many African doctors over here. If you want to say us African Americans, probably because your ancestors raped ours. If they'd have left us alone, our culture, society, and development and everything would be top tier. But the Africans that come over here, they are top tier. Y'all just want to confuse them with us. Okay. Seriously, using a racist edge lord talking point here. Oh, yeah, he responded to the dude that said, I knew it was gonna be some racism here. What's your point? Okay. This dude said he responded to that dude again. What's your point? Same as indigenous in the Americas, Southern Asia, and the Arctic Circle. While Europeans were still Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, the other races from the Middle East, Hindus, and Asia were the ones credited with the advancements in civilizations. You have lots of evolving to do, buddy. Oh, shit. I knew it was going to come. I knew it. What I tell you, this dude said, I am as racist as any Chinese, Japanese, Korean. A few billion people can't be wrong. Yeah, whatever. The majority are always wrong. It's always a few right ones. Actually, they can, he responded back. And if you haven't noticed, civilizations come in cycles over millennia. Now it's just the Anglo-Germanics turn. See? That's your opinion based on your bias. Humans originated in Africa. It has nothing to do with your feelings. Even if humans didn't originate in Africa, we have the same origin. What's so hard about accepting Africa as the cradle? The people or your bias? Wow. They're going in. We have the same origin. If we go back far enough, we have the same origins with earthworms. Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. We got the same origins with the first molecules on Earth. We got the same origins as trees. You know what I mean? I'll be looking that type of shit up like, damn, I wonder what's my common ancestor with a tree. Man, stuff is exciting to me. Civilization is the Nile region. It's older than any European Mediterranean. I knew they was going to get to arguing. They can't just take it for face value. They can't just say, wow, great. Let me hug every black person I see from now on. They want to hold on to that hate. Your conception is incorrect. They populated Africa and then the rest of the planet. I could easily accept the theory if it wasn't for some things that shoot too many holes in this theory. Oh, okay. People keep saying things just like you. It's my feelings that is not letting me accept this theory. You and they are completely wrong. I could accept it if there wasn't so many flaws in it. For instance, why so many findings of ancient humans with modern DNA outside of Africa way before the theory stated migration timeline? Early humans are Africans, aka Homo sapiens, dude. Neanderthals were not humans. Wow, they want to be Neanderthals so bad. Man, they want to be an inferior, extinct. That's just like the racist people here in America want to be rebels and want to be with the Confederates. And bro, like they extinct. Why would y'all want to bring something back that's dead? Good point. Though eugenicists, so y'all know what eugenicists is. Eugenicists are the people that didn't have this information. They thought that the white man was the most superior man and black men were the most inferior. Good point. Though eugenicists say it's mostly pre-sapiens, that sure would not make it all useless. Yeah, eugenicists didn't know a goddamn thing. The EU is there because of Europe. The same can be said for Russia. Virtually all advances they have made in culture, technology, education were borrowed or stolen from other parts of the world, except onion domes, apparently. Onion domes appear to be inexplicably Russian. Certain of their individuals have done very well once they were introduced to advanced concepts, but almost never were the original innovators. Someone else said this too. The lack of, I didn't expect this kind of quality in small YouTube channel. Good work. Keep going. I think humanity started in Africa because the continent had the ideal conditions that allowed primates to evolve, adapt, and develop more complex brains. A more complex brain was followed by more complex ways of walking, tool making, tool usage, and even language. Yeah, that makes sense. There's also a high degree of genetic diversity in Melanesia. We most likely evolved in Africa, but we quickly spread across the old world. Wow, didn't know that about Melanesia, but I agree with your sentiment. You got to ditch those pictures of a straight line from an ape to man. That's not how evolution works. That's projecting from the future to the past and creating a sense of determinism. Evolution has no knowledge of the future. It's like a bush that comes together and divides and get pruned by extinction. In geological terms, the African continent has A, spent the most time near the equator, B, spent the most time above sea level, and relatedly has the smallest continental seashells. The implication is that Africa had fewer and or milder extinction events, and that the other areas with more evolutionary pressures, climate seasons, combined with species mixing, makes Africa the laboratory and leaves winnowing, mixing, and culling to Europe and Asia. Okay. Okay. That's what Marvin E. Green said on here. When humans' brains evolved, they got the hell out of there. Oh, shit. He said and went to Alabama. Yeah, they did. Our brains evolved and we started moving around. Why does it bother some people that humans evolved in Africa? Is it something their parents taught them, or is it genetically ingrained for some people to be stupid? I think it's a combination of both. LOL, I think it's mostly that people get uncomfortable when their current understanding of things is challenging, no matter what it is. If legitimate evidence was presented suggesting people evolved outside of Africa, it wouldn't be easy for me to switch my opinion on a dime. I'm going to add a comment. I'm going to say eugenics and colonialism. No, I'm gonna put a comma. Colonialism, racism, and reinforcement of all of these things through education and upbringing. I'm gonna add a comment outside of anybody else's comment. Oh man, I just put something up here. It's gonna start some shit. I said, with the recent uproar of the far right here in America, I know this isn't pleasant news. This is the kind of stuff that people in those circles would debunk and debate forever. The reaction to facts like this in this climate reinforces how false ideology weaken societies. Yeah, our society is weak because no one wants to learn facts. Yep, everybody want to talk about what they think all the goddamn time. Yeah, I went in a little bit, you know what I mean? So yeah, let's finish watching this shit though. I love evolution.
Just about that 7 million year mark. It would have looked very similar to a chimp, but this fossilized skull tells us it wasn't. The hole at the base of the skull is called the foramen magnum. It connects the brain stem to the spinal cord. In Sahelanthropus, it sits close to the front. This is unlike other apes, whose foramen magnum is further back. It suggests that this species could stand or walk with a more vertical posture. Since its fossils are pretty scarce, whether it was fully upright is still debated. A million years later, Aurorin tugenensis appears in Kenya. Its femur tells an even clearer story. The femoral head, which would have fit into its pelvis, looks almost like that of a human. When you stand upright, your legs bear more weight and bear it differently, and this femur is better attuned to that function. But like Sahelanthropus, Aurorin is known from only a handful of fossils, so its place on the family tree is fuzzy. Then comes Ardipithecus, also known as Ardi. Ardi was found in Ethiopia and is 4 or 5 million years old. The skull and pelvis hint at habitual bipedalism. Some key signs are its forward foramen magnum, bowl-shaped pelvis, and knees that slightly bow inward. Again, these mostly help stabilize the weight of the upper body. Yet the foot keeps a fiercely divergent big toe for gripping branches. Think of Ardi as a multi-use vehicle, built to drive on the ground, but still excellent for off-roading in the trees.
Attention growth hackers and hustlers. Would it be a bad idea if we paid for your marketing? That means you would get
Ardi was followed by a large genus of hominins known as Australopithecus. With so many different species, we can't cover them all. They spanned from roughly 4 million to 1 million years ago, living in East and South Africa. They all share signs of habitual bipedality, with many of the same traits as Ardi. Take Australopithecus afarensis, for example. You may know her as Lucy. In addition to her knees and hips, she had a spine that was more adept at supporting an upright posture. Australopithecus even left us footprints to reassure ourselves of their relatively modern locomotion. They're 3.6 million years old and come from a site called Laetoli in Tanzania. The footprints have stayed preserved in volcanic ash. The impressions indicate these hominins walked heel first, transferred their weight to the ball of their foot, then pushed off their toes. The tracks also hint at family life, showing possible evidence of youngsters following their parents' footsteps. So it's pretty locked in. Australopithecus was literally making strides toward modern humans. Inevitably, the next question is, why did these species start walking on 2 feet? For starters, their bodies were kind of pre-adapted to it in a sense. A body built for climbing trees is actually better suited to transitioning to bipedalism than walking on all fours. It sounds like a contradiction, but navigating trees requires a degree of familiarity with being oriented vertically. Compare this to something like a fox, whose body is almost always oriented horizontally. But as the saying goes, don't fix what ain't broke. If everything was going fine up in the trees, these ancient hominins might have never evolved. There had to have been some evolutionary incentive to ditch whatever wasn't working. Numerous hypotheses have been proposed to explain this phenomenon. However, the most compelling idea we have at the moment is this. There was no single cause. It was a stack of pressures that pushed some apes upright, and once it worked, it stuck. In other words, multiple hypotheses fit together. The initial drivers were most likely environmental shifts occurring in Africa. Paleo-environmental work has shown that during the time of Australopithecus and the early hominins, their environments were shifting from dense jungles to patchy woodlands. After exhausting a patch of food, these hominins would then need to travel some distance to find another. To do so, bipedalism is more efficient than walking on all fours. Bipedal walking uses less energy across long distances and helps with thermoregulation. This goes hand in hand with the postural feeding idea, which says apes stood up to reach and grab food. Think about it. Before moving on to the next patch, it would have been helpful to maximize your caloric input here first. So reaching for those tough to get fruits before your travels would have favored an upright stance. This could be a reason why many of these hominins still retain some of their climbing traits to grab those higher foods. We even see some modern apes doing this while feeding. Lastly, the provisioning hypothesis, which adds the human-like social pressures. Carrying food, infants, or tools would have been more efficient once our hands were freed. All of these factors would have worked in conjunction to help hominins adapt to the more patchy forests of Africa. It was this continent that offered the right stage for these pressures to play out repeatedly. Contrast this to orangutans. Orangutans are a long-running success story of tree life. Their lineage split from African apes back in the Miocene. They migrated to Southeast Asia's rainforests and remained there for millions of years. They evolved into big, slow-moving apes with very long arms, hook-like hands, and feet built for gripping branches. Orangutan anatomy still favors living in the canopy. Their rainforest conditions have stayed relatively stable, so there was a little selective pressure to adopt a new life on the ground. No significant pressures, no new species. Unlike orangutan's stable arboreal story, early hominins were set on a very different evolutionary path. These species represent the first bipedal walkers in the hominin lineage, and the fossil evidence confirms they arose in Africa. They are a great proxy to investigate where we come from, but we don't have any sufficient evidence that any of them were our direct ancestors. So when looking at our own evolution, we must be more specific. Our genus, the Homo genus, first appeared in Africa too. Homo habilis is the oldest relative in this genus. It lived mainly in East Africa, and its fossils are dated to shortly after 3 million years ago. Accompanying this species are some of the earliest stone tools, known as Oldowan choppers. They're pretty big and clunky, but they would have been a game changer for scavenging meat and accessing bone marrow. Earlier tools, known as Lomekwi choppers, were found in Kenya and date to about 3.3 million years ago. But the species of human that made them remains ambiguous. What matters is that newly freed hands, shaped by millions of years of climbing dexterity, were now turning stone into tools. Following habilis was Homo erectus. This is where things get a little trickier. Homo erectus is the first hominid that would almost feel human if you saw them today. They were permanently bipedal. They had longer legs than arms, and their brains were significantly larger than all prior species. A seriously important feature of erectus is that it's the oldest human species we have evidence of outside of Africa. It's believed that a combination of their more advanced Acheulean tools and hunting strategies gave them the advantage to partake in such vast migrations. By about 1.8 million years ago, Erectus made it to the Dmanisi site in Georgia, demonstrating they were already living in Western Eurasia.
Oh yeah, if you're paying for a bunch of different apps, that's excessive. But if you can get the YouTube...
From roughly the same time, populations show up in Indonesia. They even persist on the island of Java for well over 1 million years. This wide reach creates two headaches. First is the possibility that regional populations evolved locally. African, Georgian, and Javanese fossils display differences in skull shape, brain size, and body size. Some researchers classify African forms into Homo ergaster and keep Asian fossils as Homo erectus. Others lump them together as a single highly variable species. Second, early dispersals and long survival on different continents mean the fossil record is painted by a broad brush. It's hard to draw clean lines between species, origins, and migrations. However, the oldest Homo erectus fossils still come from Africa, specifically around Lake Turkana in Kenya. They date to between 1.8 and 2 million years ago. This strongly suggests that the species first emerged in Africa before spreading outward. Once on the move, they adapted to a wide range of environments quickly. They survived the savannas of Africa, the temperate valleys of the Caucasus, and the tropical forests of Southeast Asia. This flexibility is part of what makes Homo erectus so important. So in short, it probably evolved in Africa and migrated outward early. But its huge range and local variation muddy any simplified stories about where we come from or who we are. So based on the current state of the archaeological record, hominins and our Homo genus most likely came from Africa. Time to narrow in on our species specifically, Homo sapiens. Here, things get even wonkier. The oldest Homo sapiens fossil consists of skull fragments discovered in Morocco, dating to 300,000 years ago. This is yet another point on the scoreboard for Africa. What complicates things is that we weren't the only species of Homo around at this time. There were so many human variants that started emerging around 1 million years ago and after. These include Homo antecessor, Homo heidelbergensis, and the famous Neanderthals. And they've been found all over the old world. So where do we fit in this mix? Two competing hypotheses have historically duked it out. The out of Africa hypothesis versus multi-regional evolution. The out of Africa hypothesis argues that Homo sapiens evolved once in Africa and later spread across the world, largely replacing other archaic humans. The multi-regional hypothesis argues that modern humans evolved in various locations simultaneously from earlier Homo erectus populations, and they had constant gene flow keeping them one species. But in recent years, DNA and genetics have helped sharpen the picture. For example, the greatest genetic diversity among modern humans is in Africa. Genetic diversity builds up over long periods of time as things like mutations accumulate. So the fact that Africans have more variation than anywhere else means that Homo sapiens have been living and evolving there the longest. Populations outside of Africa carry only a subset of that variation, which makes sense if small groups migrated out of Africa later and took only part of that gene pool with them. This is supported by additional genetic evidence indicating that all non-African people today can trace their genes to small populations that left the continent around 50,000 years ago. Shortly thereafter, all other species of Homo were extinct. Our deeper genetic diversity in Africa points to the out of Africa hypothesis. However, ancient...
This is what I was talking about. This is what I keep talking about on my channel. That right there. That, and I'm going to play it again just so y'all can hear it. That's going to be one of my shorts that's going to go crazy. Yeah, we all from Africa. It's right here.
One species. But in recent years, DNA and genetics have helped sharpen the picture. For example, the greatest genetic diversity among modern humans is in Africa. Genetic diversity builds up over long.
If you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base 44.
I got a different channel I need to jump on.
Periods of time as things like mutations accumulate. So the fact that Africans have more variation than anywhere else means that Homo sapiens have been living and evolving there the longest. Populations outside of Africa carry only a subset of that variation, which makes sense if small groups migrated out of Africa later and took only part of that gene pool with them. This is supported by additional genetic evidence indicating that all non-African people today can trace their genes to small populations that left the continent around 50,000 years ago. Shortly thereafter, all other species of Homo were extinct. Our deeper genetic diversity in Africa points to the out of Africa hypothesis. However, ancient interbreeding with species like Neanderthals and Denisovans left traces in the DNA of non-Africans. So it wasn't a pure replacement. There was some multi-regional mixing between species, but Homo sapiens came to dominate. What was it about early Homo sapiens in Africa that gave them such an advantage? Why wasn't it the other way around with species like...
Maybe it's them other species that's mixed in with all the other non-Africans that make them so, like, hate us so much. You know, maybe it's those older species, the more inferior species within the gene pool that's trying to attack the original man. You know, I think that might be what it is, like those extinct ancestors that just hate, the idea that they extinct now. Maybe that's what it is, man. I don't know.
Neanderthals migrating into Africa and replacing Homo sapiens? The answer lies in a combination of our genetics, our sociality, and the ancient African environments that shaped them. New research paints a continent-wide social web of ancient Homo sapiens. A pan-African network of people, genes, and ideas stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. We see this archaeologically by the presence of artifacts that were traded or migrated with humans over long distances. For example, ostrich eggshell beads moved across the continent 50,000 years ago. 200,000 years ago, obsidian for tool making traveled over 160 kilometers, and pigments were traded as far back as 320,000 years ago. Even gift exchange systems among modern Africans echo the same logic today. Among today's San hunter-gatherer communities, anthropologists have observed a continuing practice of reciprocal gift-giving known as Zaro. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which functions as a long-distance social network. It's wild to think that such a practice could be hundreds of thousands of years old. Furthermore, genetic and archaeological data show repeated cycles of isolation
and those
and
people
contact.
right there, that
Groups often
tribe
diverged,
where a
and
lot of the Asians and Europeans descend from. That group of people is where a lot of, I ain't gonna say a lot, all of all of the Asians and Europeans descend from. All people, we talking about everybody except for Africans evolved from this
obsidian for tool making traveled over 160 kilometers, and pigments were traded as far back as 320,000 years ago. Even gift exchange systems among modern Africans echo the same logic.
Khoisan people, they look like her. That's how they look. They got the slanty eyes like Asians. They're black, they black people, but they're not as dark as the Nigerians, and but they like caramel colored, and that's who everybody outside of Africa evolved from, this group of people.
Today, among today's San hunter-gatherer communities, anthropologists have observed a continuing practice of reciprocal gift-giving known as Zaro. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which functions as a long-distance social network.
Right there.
It's wild to think that such a practice could be hundreds of thousands of years old. Furthermore, genetic and archaeological data show repeated cycles of isolation and contact. Groups often diverged and inhabited local places for long stretches. This would produce cultural and slight anatomical differences unique to their respective environments. Then, intermittent contact between groups let those separate innovations recombine. Think of what breeds innovation nowadays. Music is a good example. Regional music can be seen as semi-isolated populations. Blues grew out of African traditions and work songs. Country sprung from rural folk and ballads. Gospel and R&B grew from church and urban life. When these genres met at record shops, radio stations, and dances, they mixed. Artists borrowed riffs and other ideas and invented something new, rock and roll. This is the same mechanism that occurred in ancient Africa for thousands of years. Studies looking at hunter-gatherer networks confirm that parallel invention in semi-isolated groups, followed by recombination, speeds up the rise of complex technologies, better than a single fully connected population could. The same is almost certainly true for genetics. Genetic diversity is a safeguard against extinction. A wider gene pool means more opportunity for positive mutations. This Pan-African network would have promoted such variation, while keeping Homo sapiens integrated as a species. The result is mosaic evolution. Modern human biology and culture emerged from many interacting populations, not one single tribe. We owe our adaptability to that variation, and it's that adaptability that allowed us to outpace other human species. So, our story is long, but the preponderance of evidence supports an African origin of humanity. The fossils, stone tools, and genetics all converge on this continent. And the reasons for this are many. It started with the earliest primates adapting to a complex prehistoric world with new adaptations. Then, massive tectonic events allowed their descendants to eventually migrate into Africa, keeping them safe from the Eurasian extinctions. The dramatic climate shifts of the African continent provided the right pressures for ancestral apes to start walking on the ground. Its wide range of environments then prompted Homo sapiens to develop immense variation and become the most adaptable species on the planet. But science is built on challenging the status quo. We must keep our minds open and never settle for the current paradigm. Paradigms are always shifting, and with each turn, we get a little closer to the truth. So, what if we didn't evolve in Africa? What are the best arguments against an African origin? First was one Miocene ape living in Europe that makes us reconsider some things. The headline.
Yeah, I knew they had to do this for this climate. This video came out like 2 days ago. So with this climate of neo-Nazis and far right, political shit, they can't just state the facts and let that be that. Like say this type of shit I say. They gotta give them something, or they they already clowning in the dang on comments. But if you just left it at that, like, oh man, they'd be trying to fight in the comments. So you gotta give them throw them a little bone.
Making ape is called Danuvius. It lived in Germany around 11 million years ago. Its skeletal remains gave researchers a rare, detailed glimpse of how some ancient apes moved about. It had long forelimbs and hind limbs, mobile wrists and ankles, and joint shapes suggesting the animal could both climb and adopt an upright posture on its hind legs. Researchers have called this form of locomotion extended limb clambering. They say that Danuvius combines the adaptations of bipeds and suspensory apes and provides a model for the common ancestor of great apes and humans. Why does that matter? Because it pushes back the possible origins of upright body mechanics well before the African hominin story. While it wasn't totally bipedal, its posture makes it a provocative candidate for the ancestor to the hominin lineage. An alternative idea could be that Danuvius's descendants gave rise to hominins in Europe, who then migrated to Africa. That said, there's a long geographic and temporal gap before the first hominins appear. More fossils within that gap would be needed to support this. Another challenge deals with Homo erectus specifically. We touched on it before, but it's plausible that Homo erectus gave rise to Homo sapiens somewhere throughout the Eurasian landmass. Having lived there for over 1 million years, there was plenty of time for evolutionary changes to build on this already adaptable species. Also, we can extend our logic for the rise of Homo sapiens in Africa to this species. If inhabiting a wide environmental range helped African Homo sapiens diversify and innovate, why would it not do the same for Eurasian Homo erectus? It's not impossible that this happened first, then those Eurasian populations migrated back into Africa and were evolutionarily refined into Homo sapiens. Even early scientists such as Ernst Haeckel speculated this when observing the Java man fossils. They believed that this Indonesian Homo erectus represented an intermediate form between orangutans or gibbons and humans. Genetics tells us we are more closely related to African chimps than these Asian primates, so that's off the table. This doesn't disprove that later Homo erectus living in Asia could have contributed to our lineage more than we know. Lastly, the Homo sapiens fossils we find outside of Africa keep getting older. 2 sites are especially important: Mislia Cave in Israel and Apodema Cave in Greece. In Mislia Cave, a single jawbone was found intact in a Middle Paleolithic layer. It matches modern human anatomy with its U-shaped dental arcade and cheekbone placement near the first molar. It also sat beside a full Lavawa toolkit resembling African technology of the time. Multiple dating methods placed this fossil between 194,000 and 177,000 years ago. 2 skull fragments were found in Apodema Cave. Digital reconstructions show that one has a rounded modern human rear skull and dates to 210,000 years ago. This makes it the oldest known Homo sapiens fossil outside of Africa. Interestingly, the other skull is that of a Neanderthal and dates to around 170,000 years ago. The pair of skulls tells a story of early Homo sapiens reaching this part of the world before Neanderthals. Neither site is as old as the fossil from Morocco, but they give us a reason to continue our search for early Homo sapiens outside of Africa. But now I want to know what you think. I have two questions for you. First, what do you think of the evidence? Are you on Team Africa or Team Eurasia? Second, I want you to speculate what humanity would look like today if Homo sapiens evolved.
And don't go by no politics, man. God damn. Go by you. If y'all don't want to go by the facts of like how human life started, man, like that's almost like spitting in your ancestors' face, man. It is spitting in your ancestors' face. Like to not want to just say, okay, all right, I come from Africa. Damn. Like all the evidence, points there. Like that's all I be trying to say. Like if the evidence points there, just accept it, man. Damn.
Elsewhere. How different would modern civilization look had we began somewhere like Australia, or if the New World monkeys of South America evolved into humans? Let me know what you think in the comments. Since you made it to the end, you must be a lover of history and prehistory like myself. So I have two more things you'll probably like. Check out my free newsletter in the video description. Subscribe with your email, and you'll get updates on the channel, archaeology-related news, and even music suggestions. And if you still want more, watch this video about ancient North America. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to check that out.
If you don't understand the rules of...
I'm just going to cue it. I'm not about to play it. I'm about to shut this down. All right, man. So I just watched that whole video, and I'm glad I did. The whole time I'm really testing out my new studio, as I told y'all earlier. Testing out my new studio, man. Testing it out, man. That's what I'm really doing. Testing out my new studio, man. So yeah, man, I'm about to shut this down. Thank y'all for, I think I got about 3 or 4 views. I ain't tripping. I did this only for myself, because I love evolution. And I just wanted to share with, a lot of people, I think, especially nowadays with this climate, don't want to learn about evolution because they want to be stuck on their old ways, and they don't want to hear no facts about how we are the same people. They so stuck on being separated. I'm white and you black, and here I am saying we all black, meaning we all originally from Africa, like let's just say that together. And then like when y'all say go back to Africa, I could say you go back to Africa, you go back to Africa. Like you left before I did. You need to go back before I go back. You need to learn more about Africa than I do. You know what I'm saying? I can look at you and tell you need to learn more about Africa than I do. And that go for the Asians and all the other races of the world, man. So yeah, so that's all. I just wanted to put this out there and say, look, get in tune with your history, man. Learn about evolution. Learn the fact that you black, just like I'm black. And that's it. And a lot of you so-called, like a lot of you melanated people that look like me, y'all don't want to believe evolution is. Y'all are actually the main ones I noticed that I don't know. They ain't black, man. Nobody like. I see so many black people, man. When I say what I said, they just hate the idea that other people could be from Africa too. Like, bro, why don't you share? Like when y'all say black owned business, y'all can literally say everybody black and everybody can come to your business. You know, Black History Month, everybody can celebrate Black History Month. Everybody can celebrate Juneteenth. Quit trying to, be as like have we don't own this black. Everybody black, man. Everybody can share in what it means to be black at this point. Like that, now that we know the truth, you know what I'm saying? Like we know that race isn't really real. Like we know that it ain't real. We can look at other people and know that we're looking at some people. Like if you know you're looking at some people, then you know that we us. Like that's just that. But yeah, people so messed up in their head right now. Like when I say everybody black, because I say this to everybody. I say I don't care who they are. I said anybody. I don't care how they look. A lot of people, they look at me like they want to be offended. But when they really think about what I just said, they can't be offended. See what I'm saying? So I say this, when I say this to white people, everybody black, most of the time they say, I know. And it's like they didn't want me to know. It's like they want to stay separated. And it's like, nah, bro. I know we us. I know you me, regardless if you want to embrace the fact that you originally from Africa or not. I know this. So I'm going to treat you like I treat everybody else. I love you. I love you regardless if you don't. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's part of the solution. I think knowing where we all come from is part of the solution. Not even gonna say part. I think it's 100% the solution of the ills of today, socially and culturally. I think that evolution, knowing that and teaching our kids this, because I teach my kids the same thing. And all my kids seem to have a healthy perspective on multicultural and being around other races. They not tripping at all, So I think it's the key to it might not be this generation, but hopefully moving forward, the next, generation alpha, hopefully my 8-year-old's generation, maybe in her generation, we can start to put some curriculum in the schools to really educate them on how much they all are connected, DNA wise or more, more so culturally, like that DNA that traces all races back to Africa. We need to find a way to go into Africa to find out exactly what tribe they may have. I think they did find the tribe. Like I said, the tribe is, I believe, the Khoisan people with the slanty eyes. I believe they traced them to that tribe. Yeah, from some other videos that I watched. But look, I'll be back tomorrow, y'all. This is the beginning of something new for me. I'm so excited. That's why I did so many videos today. Man, I love doing this. All right, y'all enjoy. Have a good night.